RAF Farnborough, Hampshire, England, March 27, 1940. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine screams to life on the test stand, and immediately something is wrong. Chief Engineer Stanley Thornton's coffee cup rattles against the metal observation table. The vibration isn't right. The exhaust note, that distinctive howl of 12 cylinders firing in perfect sequence, carries an edge he's never heard before. Through the reinforced glass of the test cell, he watches the propeller blur into invisibility, the wooden blades clawing at cold morning air. His assistant, Peter Wickham, is shouting something, pointing at the gauges. But Thornton is already moving, his mind racing through possibilities. They'd mixed the fuel batch 3 hours ago, before dawn. Standard 87-octane aviation gasoline with a new tetraethyl lead additive, except the drums. The American drums. Wickham had grabbed the wrong shipment from the storage depot, not the standard additive batch, the experimental one, the formula that Shell Oil had sent over with a warning label, do not exceed 4.5 cc per gallon, extreme detonation risk. They'd mixed it at 6 cc per gallon. The tachometer needle climbs past 3,000 revolutions per minute. The engine should be tearing itself apart. The increased octane rating should be causing pre-ignition shattering piston. Says this power plant be scattering itself across the test cell in the next 10 horsepower. That's impossible. The design specification is 1,030 horsepower. Nothing they've done should add 280 horsepower to an engine already pushed to its theoretical limits. Thornton's hand hovers over the emergency shutdown lever. He should kill it now. Save the engine. File a report. Stick to the specifications that have been working since 1935. But he doesn't, because somewhere over France, RAF pilots are dying. And this mistake, this beautiful, terrifying mistake, might be exactly what could save them. London, Air Ministry, Whitehall. 6 weeks. Earlier, February 12, 1940. The war isn't going the way anyone expected. Squadron leader Hugh Dowding stands before a tactical map of Western Europe, his face carved from the same granite as British resolve. But the pins on that map tell a story of terrible arithmetic. German Messerschmitt Bf-109S, the Luftwaffe's frontline fighter, have a maximum speed of 354 miles per hour at 12,500 feet. The RAF's Spitfire Ma 1, Britain's best answer, tops out at 362 miles per hour under ideal conditions, 8 miles per hour. That's the razor's edge between survival and annihilation, between intercepting German bombers before they reach London and watching them slip through, between a pilot returning home and a burning wreck. And the Germans are already working on the next variant. Air Chief Marshal Cyril Newall lights his pipe, the tobacco glowing orange in the dim ministry office. The Hurricane is 40 miles per hour slower than the 109, he says quietly. We're feeding our boys into a meat grinder with yesterday's machines. The numbers are brutally simple. Britain has perhaps 36 months before the Luftwaffe achieves complete air superiority. The shipyards can't build ships fast enough, the factories can't produce aircraft fast enough, and the engineering teams can't redesign engines fast enough. The Rolls-Royce Merlin V3, the 12-cylinder liquid-cooled V12 powering both the Spitfire and Hurricane, is already a masterpiece of engineering. 27 liters of displacement, supercharged, capable of sustained operation at altitudes where men's blood boils without pressurization. It represents the absolute cutting edge of 1930s aviation technology, and it isn't enough. What Dowding doesn't know, what nobody in that room knows, is that 180 miles away, in a chemical laboratory in Stanlow, Cheshire, a different kind of war is being fought. Shell Oil Refinery, Stanlow, same day, February 12, 1940, 2:15 p.m. Dr. Francis Alfred Freeth is staring at a beaker of amber liquid like it holds the secrets of the universe. In a way, it does. Freeth is a chemist, not a warrior. His battlefield is molecular structures and combustion dynamics. At 54, he spent 3 decades studying petroleum chemistry, particularly the mysterious property called octane rating, a fuel's resistance to premature detonation inside an engine cylinder. The principle is elegant. Gasoline is a cocktail of hydrocarbon chains. When compressed in an engine cylinder and ignited by a spark plug, it should burn smoothly, pushing the piston down in a controlled explosion. But compress it too much or make it too hot, and it detonates spontaneously, a phenomenon called knocking that destroys engines from the inside out. Higher octane fuel resists knocking, which means you can compress it more, which means more power from the same engine displacement. The Americans discovered that adding tetraethyl lead, a compound of lead, carbon, and hydrogen, increases octane rating dramatically. Standard aviation gasoline in 1940 rates at 87 octane. The Americans have been experimenting with 100-octane formulas, but there's a problem. Lead is toxic, corrosive. It fouls spark plugs, coats valve seats, and slowly destroys engines from within. The standard additive mixture, refined by Standard Oil and tested across thousands of hours, uses precisely 4.5 cubic centimeters per gallon. That's the safe threshold. That's what the engines are designed for. Freeth is holding a mixture with 6 cc per gallon. His colleague, Dr. James Waring, shakes his head. Francis, we've been through this. Above 5 cc, you're risking catastrophic engine failure. The lead deposits are theoretical, Freeth interrupts. Based on laboratory testing at sustained maximum power, but combat operations, a fighter pilot isn't running at emergency power for hours, 5 minutes, maybe 10 in a desperate engagement. And if you're wrong, then we've destroyed a dozen test engines and embarrassed ourselves in front of the Air Ministry. Freeth doesn't say the other part. If he's right, if an engine can tolerate higher lead concentrations in short bursts, the octane rating could jump from 87 to 100, maybe higher. And that means compression ratios could increase, and that means power. Raw, beautiful, war-winning power. He seals the beaker and marks it. Experimental batch 317B. Do not exceed 4.5 cc/gal in operational use. Then he ships it to RAF Farnborough. What happens next is nobody's plan. RAF Farnborough Test Facility, March 27, 1940, 4:30 a.m. Peter Wickham is 23 years old, exhausted, and making the most important mistake of his life. The test schedule calls for a dawn engine run. Standard protocol: drain the test cell fuel tanks, refill with fresh aviation gasoline, add the prescribed tetraethyl lead mixture, run the engine through a 4-hour endurance profile. Wickham has done this 47 times without incident. But tonight, the regular fuel depot is closed for inventory, so he walks to the auxiliary storage bunker, a Nissen hut that smells of oil and damp, and finds the drums marked Avgas additive. There are 2 sets of drums. He grabs the ones nearest the door. The warning labels are there. Experimental batch 317B, the concentration note, restriction. But Wickham has been awake for 19 hours. In the dim light of a single electric bulb, the labels blurred together. His mind fills in what it expects. He mixes 6 cc per gallon into 500 gallons of aviation gasoline. By 6:45 a.m., Stanley Thornton is watching his test engine perform miracles. Test cell observation room, 7:23 a.m. Shut it down. Flight Lieutenant Marcus Henderson's voice cuts through the engine roar. He's the Air Ministry observer sent from Whitehall to witness routine testing. There's nothing routine about this. Thornton doesn't move. His eyes are locked on the dynamometer reading. The Merlin is pulling 1,310 horsepower at 3,000 revolutions per minute and plus 12 pounds of boost pressure. The exhaust temperature is elevated but stable. Cylinder head temperatures are running hot, but within tolerance. I said shut it down, Chief Engineer. With respect, sir, not yet. Henderson moves toward the emergency cutoff, but Thornton blocks him. It's insubordination. It could end his career, but something extraordinary. 3 seconds of data. Wickham is frantically scribbling numbers. Manifold pressure holding steady, oil pressure 85 psi, no unusual vibration. Engine temperature 121 degrees Celsius. That's only 9 degrees above normal operating temperature. This isn't possible, Henderson breathed. But it is happening, right now, in front of them. Thornton's mind races through the thermodynamics. Higher octane fuel allows higher compression before detonation. Higher compression means more power per combustion cycle. The supercharger, designed to force more air into the cylinders at altitude, can now operate at higher boost pressures without causing knock. But there's no way they've accidentally stumbled onto 100 octane fuel. The formula doesn't exist yet. Shell is still experimenting. The Americans are still perfecting the refining process. This is just 87 octane with a standard lead additive, isn't it? Check the fuel mixture, Thornton orders. Wickham goes pale. Sir, I used the standard procedure. Check the mixture. 20 minutes later, they have their answer. The experimental drums, the 6 cc concentration, the formula that should have destroyed the engine. Thornton allows himself the smallest smile. Gentlemen, he says quietly, I believe we've just found our edge. Shell Oil Headquarters, London, March the 29th, 1940. Dr. Freeth receives the telephone call at 11 p.m. He's dragged from bed, driven through blackout darkened London streets, and ushered into a conference room where 3 men in RAF uniforms are waiting. They show him the data from Farnborough. Impossible is his first reaction. Repeatable is their answer. They've run the test 6 more times, 6 different engines, all with batch 317Bs. Mixed at 6 cc per gallon, every single Merlin produces between 1,290 and 1,320 horsepower. A 25% increase over standard specifications. The engines run hot, certainly. The spark plugs foul faster. Oil consumption increases by 30%, but they don't explode. You're telling me, Freeth says slowly, that fighter pilots can run emergency power with this mixture? For short durations, yes. 8 to 10 minutes before thermal buildup becomes critical, long enough for a combat engagement. The implications detonate in Freeth's mind like sequential bombs. A Spitfire, with 25% more power, doesn't just fly faster, it climbs faster. Critical for intercepting high-altitude bombers. It accelerates faster, the difference between life and death in a turning dogfight. It maintains speed at higher altitudes, where thinner air normally starves engines of performance. At 8 miles per hour, advantage becomes 40 miles. But there's a problem, a massive war-losing problem. Gentlemen, Freeth says carefully, I can produce maybe 10,000 gallons per month of this mixture. Britain's fighter force consumes 3.2 million gallons monthly. Silent. However, he continues, if we're only using it for combat operations for short bursts at emergency power, pilots could fly on standard 87-octane fuel for normal operations and inject the high-octane mixture only when needed. The youngest officer, a squadron leader named Douglas Bader, leans forward. He'll lose both legs in a flying accident 6 months from now, but that won't stop him from becoming one of Britain's greatest fighter aces. You're describing a two-fuel system. I'm describing a survival system. Rolls-Royce factory, Derby, April 15, 1940. The engineering happens at wartime speed. 24-hour shifts, slide rules, and drafting tables covered with calculations. The challenge is elegant. Design a secondary fuel system that can inject the high-octane mixture directly into the supercharger intake. The pilot controls it with a single lever, marked with warning stripes and labeled emergency power maximum 10 minutes. They call it the special fuel injection system. Officially, the pilots will call it the horseshoe, because engaging it feels like kicking a dying horse in the ribs and getting a stampede in response. By May 1st, 1940, the first modified Spitfires roll out of the Supermarine factory in Southampton. They look identical to standard Markeyes, but mounted beneath the engine cowling, hidden from casual inspection, is a small secondary tank. 20 gallons of batch 317B, now officially designated 100-130th octane aviation spirit. The designation means 100 octane for lean mixture operation, 130 octane rating for rich mixture at full power. It's the most potent aviation fuel in the world. The Germans don't know it exists. RAF Station, Duxford, Cambridgeshire, May 10, 1940, 8:15 a.m. Squadron leader Geoffrey Stevenson climbs into his modified Spitfire with no idea he's sitting atop a revolution. The briefing was simple. Test flight, evaluate new fuel system, report any anomalies. Standard procedure for prototype modifications. Stevenson has 847 hours in Spitfires. He knows every rivet, every quirk, every harmonic vibration of the Merlin engine. At 8,000 feet, over the Cambridgeshire countryside, he pushes the throttle to maximum power. The Spitfire responds exactly as expected. A steady acceleration to 348 miles per hour. Then he reaches for the red striped levers. The Merlin doesn't roar, it screams. Stevenson is slammed back into his seat as the fighter leaps forward. Like a sprinter hearing a starting pistol, the airspeed indicator winds up impossibly fast. 360, 375, 390, 405 miles per hour. 405. His hands are shaking on the control stick. The aircraft is stable, responsive, eager. He holds back into a vertical climb, something that should bleed energy rapidly, slow the Spitfire to a vulnerable crawl. Instead, he rockets upward. 8,000 feet becomes 12,000, then 18,000. The altimeter spins like it's broken. At 22,000 feet, he levels off, his breath coming in short gasps in the thin air. Below him, England spreads out like a green and brown tapestry. Ahead of him, across the channel, lies occupied Europe. And for the first time since the war started, Stevenson believes they might actually have a chance. He keys his radio. Duxford Control, this is a Red Leader. Request immediate meeting with Station Commander. Tell him we're going to win this. Downing Street, London, May 24th, 1940. Prime Minister Winston Churchill listens to the briefing with his characteristic intensity. Cigar clammed to between teeth, eyes sharp despite the late hour. The news from France is catastrophic. The German blitzkrieg has shattered Allied defenses. The British Expeditionary Force is trapped at Dunkirk. Invasion seems imminent. In this darkness, Air Chief Marshal Dowding is presenting what sounds like fantasy. We have modified 147 Spitfires and 89 Hurricanes with the special fuel system, Dowding explains. Production capacity will deliver 80 additional aircraft per week through June. Churchill removes his cigar. And this fuel mixture, this accident, genuinely provides the performance you claim. Prime Minister, our pilots now have a decisive advantage in speed, climb rate, and altitude performance. For the first time, we can dictate engagement terms against the Luftwaffe. How long can they maintain this advantage? 8 to 10 minutes per engagement, sir. Then they must revert to standard power to avoid engine damage. Churchill is silent for a long moment. His mind is calculating probabilities, weighing risks. If Germans learn about this fuel formula, they'll replicate it within months. But right now, today, Britain needs every advantage. How many people know the specifications, he asked. Perhaps 60 engineers, chemists, and military personnel. We've classified it under the Official Secrets Act, code name, Operation Peppermint. Peppermint, Churchill repeats. Then he smiles. That famous bulldog grin that will become iconic. Gentlemen, I want every fighter in RAF operational commands equipped with this system by mid-July, and I want absolute secrecy maintained. Let the Germans wonder how British pilots are suddenly out flying their vaunted 109. What Churchill doesn't say, what he doesn't need to say, is that the next few months will determine whether Britain survives as a free nation. The mistake that Stanley Thornton chose not to shut down is about to face its real test. RAF Station, Biggin Hill, Kent, July the 10th, 1940, 2:47 p.m. The Battle of Britain begins not with trumpets and declarations, but with radar blips and scrambled telephone calls. Where Pilot Officer David Crook is 24 years old, a solicitor's son from Yorkshire, who learned to fly in the Cambridge University Air Squadron. He's sitting in his Spitfire at the end of Biggin Hill's grass runway when the operations telephone rings in the dispersal hut. Scramble red section, Vector 110, Angels 15, large raid approaching Dover. The Merlin engine coughs to life. Crook's hands move through the startup sequence with practiced efficiency. Fuel mixture rich, propeller to fine pitch, magneto switches on. Around him, 11 other Spitfires are awakening. 4 minutes later, they're airborne, clawing for altitude over the Kent countryside. The radio crackles. Red leader, this is Biggin control. Raid count now 40-plus bandits, a Dornier 17S with fighter escort, probable 109S at Angels 20,000 feet. Higher than the bombers. The Germans are learning. Crook spots them at 18,000 feet, a formation of twin-engine Dorniers, sunlight glinting off greenhouse canopies. And above them, tiny crosses against blue sky, the 109S is circling, waiting. Red leader's voice is steady in Crook's headset. Red section, prepare for climbing attack. Remember your briefing, standard power to Angels 19, then horseshoe fuel on my mark. They climb steadily, 12 Spitfires in 4 sections of 3 aircraft each. The 109S have spotted them now, breaking formation, diving to engage. This is the moment. The critical mathematics of altitude, speed, and energy. Red section, now, horseshoe fuel, execute. Crook's thumb finds the red striped lever, pushes it forward. The transformation is instantaneous. The Merlin's howl becomes a banshee shriek. The Spitfire surges upward like it's been catapulted. Crook's vision grays at the edges as G-forces build. 4 Gs, 5 Gs, but he maintains the climb. The 109S are diving at them, expecting standard interception geometry, expecting to meet the Spitfires at 19,000 feet with superior altitude energy. Instead, the Spitfires blow through 19,000 feet, still accelerating. At 21,000 feet, they level off above the German fighters with enough speed to choose their engagement. It's the tactical advantage British pilots have been dreaming about for months. Red leader's command is crisp. Sections attack target the 109S first. What follows is 7 minutes of chaos. Crook selects a 109 that's attempting to climb back to altitude. The German pilot is good. Veteran of Poland and France, probably, executing a climbing spiral that should be impossible for the Spitfire to match. Except Crook is still running horseshoe fuel. He stays with the 109 through 3 complete spirals, the Merlin screaming, airspeed bleeding, but altitude increasing. At 23,000 feet, the German makes a mistake, straightens out for just 2 seconds to check his tail. Crook's thumb depresses the gun button. 8303, Browning machine guns erupt, tracers converging. The 109's fuselage sparkles with impacts. Glycol coolant sprays from the punctured radiator. A white trail in the thin air. The German fighter rolls inverted and dives away, trailing smoke. Crook's fuel gauge for the secondary tank reads nearly empty. His engine temperature is climbing into the red zone. He disengages the horseshoe fuel and the Merlin settles back to normal power with an almost disappointed rumble. Below him, the Dorniers are breaking formation, jettisoning their bombs over the channel, fleeing for France. 7 109S are gone, destroyed, damaged, or retreated. The British formation has lost 1 Spitfire, the pilot bailing out safely. It's not just a victory, it's a statement. Luftwaffe Operations Center, Pas-de-Calais, France. Same day, 4:30 p.m., Oberst Werner Mulders is arguably Germany's finest fighter tactician. By war's end, he'll be credited with 115 aerial victories before his death in 1941. Right now, he's listening to pilot debriefings with growing concern. The Spitfires were faster, Herr Oberst, much faster than intelligence reports indicated. They climbed above us at full power. I could not match their rate of ascent. The engagement lasted perhaps 8 minutes, then they seemed to slow down, return to normal performance. Mulders studies the tactical maps. Something has changed. The RAF fighters that were previously just competitive are now superior in critical performance metrics, but only briefly, only during intense combat. He drafts a report to Luftwaffe High Command. British fighters demonstrating unexpected performance increases during engagement. Possible new engine variant or fuel modification. Recommend immediate intelligence investigation. The report goes to Berlin, where it's filed among 300 other tactical observations. The Luftwaffe Intelligence Service, supremely confident in their understanding of British capabilities, dismisses it as combat exaggeration. This dismissal will cost them the Battle of Britain. RAF Operations Room, Bentley Priory, August 18, 1940. They call it the hardest day. The Luftwaffe launches 850 sorties against British targets. The RAF scrambles every available fighter. The sky over southern England becomes a three-dimensional battlefield of contrails, tracer fire, and falling wreckage. By nightfall, the score is brutal. 69 German aircraft destroyed, 29 British fighters lost. But the mathematics have shifted. Before Operation Peppermint, exchange ratio favored the Germans slightly. Roughly 1.3 RAF fighters lost for every German aircraft destroyed. The Luftwaffe could sustain that arithmetic. They had more aircraft, more pilots, more production capacity. Now the ratio is reversed. 2.4 German aircraft destroyed for every British fighter lost. The Germans cannot sustain that arithmetic. Air Chief Marshal Dowding reviews the daily reports in his underground operations. On the wall, a massive map displays the day's combat, pins marking engagements, strings showing interception vectors. Red pins for German losses, blue for British. There's more red than blue. The pilots are calling it Churchill's kick, his aide reports. The horseshoe fuel system. They say it feels like the Prime Minister himself gave the aircraft a boot up the arse. Dowding allows himself a rare smile. And engine failure rates? Elevated, sir. We're replacing Merlin engines at triple the peacetime rate. Spark plugs every 12 hours of operation instead of 50. Oil consumption is through the ceiling. But the engines survive combat? Yes, sir. We've lost only 4 aircraft to engine failure related to the special fuel, and 3 of those pilots exceeded the 10-minute maximum duration. Dowding makes a note. 4 acceptable losses versus how many lives saved. The mathematics are grim, but necessary. This is war, and perfection is a luxury they cannot afford. Production status on the fuel. Shell refineries are producing 47,000 gallons weekly. Anglo-American Oil has brought their Stanlow facility online for an additional 23,000 gallons. We have sufficient supply for current operational tempo through October, possibly longer. And security? Intact, sir. German intelligence has intercepted no communications regarding the fuel specifications. As far as they know, we've simply improved engine tuning. What neither man mentions is the letter in Dowding's desk drawer. It's from Stanley Thornton, the engineer who didn't shut down the test engine that March morning. The letter is brief. Sir, I understand the debt Britain owes to this discovery is incalculable, but I must note for the record, we didn't discover anything. We made a mistake, and were merely wise enough not to waste it. Perhaps that is the truest form of engineering, recognizing when chaos has offered you a gift. Dowding has not filed the letter in official records. Some truths are too odd for history. Spitfire cockpit, 17,000 feet over Hampshire, September 15, 1940, 2:15 p.m. Pilot Officer Jeffrey Wellham is 19 years old, the youngest Spitfire pilot in Fighter Command, and he's about to validate every hour of testing, every gallon of experimental fuel, every calculated risk. The radio is chaos. Tally-ho! 109S at 3 o'clock high. Braking left. The Wellham is in a Loughbury circle. That deadly spiral where fighters chase each other's tails in an ever-tightening ring. He's glued to a 109. The German pilot, executing every defensive maneuver in the Luftwaffe playbook. Aileron rolls, split S dives, Chandelle climbs, but Wellham has the horseshoe fuel engaged. At 14,000 feet, the 109 makes his final mistake. He rolls inverted and pulls through into a split S, diving vertically, then pulling up to reverse direction. It's a brutal maneuver that costs energy but usually breaks pursuit. Willem stays with him. The dive, the pull out, 6 Gs crushing him into the seat. Vision tunneling, but the Spitfire respond at 8,000 feet. Both aircraft are pulling out, pointing skyward again, but Willem has closed the distance. 300 yards, 200, 150. His thumb finds the gun button. The 109 canopy shatters. The German fighter rolls slowly on and falls away, trailing. Willem's secondary fuel tank is empty. His engine temperature gauge is pegged in the red. But he's alive, the German isn't, and over southern England, 40 similar engagements are resolving in Britain's favor. September 15, 1940 will be recorded as the decisive day of the Battle of Britain. Hitler will postpone Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, indefinitely. The Luftwaffe will shift to night bombing, abandoning the daylight campaign that was supposed to achieve air superiority. They will never know that their defeat was sealed by a mistake made in a dim storage hut by an exhausted assistant engineer who grabbed the wrong drums. The official RAF historical analysis of the Battle of Britain fills 847 pages. On page 394, buried in technical appendices, there's a brief mention of enhanced fuel formulations introduced in May 1940. That's all. Operation Peppermint remains classified until 1958. When the files are finally opened, the story emerges in fragments, engineers' reports, fuel production records, combat performance analyses, pilot testimonials. The numbers tell the truth that words obscure. Between July and October 1940, RAF fighters equipped with the high-octane fuel system achieved kill ratios of 2.3, 1 against comparable German fighters. Standard-equipped RAF fighters achieved 1.1, 1 ratio. The difference represents approximately 340 German aircraft destroyed that would have otherwise survived, 340 aircraft that would have bombed factories, airfields, and cities, 340 aircraft that would have maintained German air superiority, 340 aircraft that might have made Operation Sea Lion feasible. Stanley Thornton receives no public recognition. He retires from Rolls-Royce in 1952, having spent 12 years refining the Merlin engine that powered not just the Spitfire, but the Hurricane, the Lancaster bomber, and ultimately the P-51 Mustang that will escort American bombers over Germany. In his private papers, discovered after his death in 1973, there's a single photograph. It shows him standing beside a Spitfire in 1945, one hand on the cowling just above where the horseshoe fuel injection system is mounted. On the back, in his careful engineer's handwriting, "The best work we ever did was knowing when to ignore the specifications." Dr. Francis Freeth never speaks publicly about his role. The experimental fuel formula that should have been a laboratory curiosity becomes the 100-130th octane standard that powers Allied aircraft through the entire war. Refineries in Britain, America, and Canada produce over 400 million gallons between 1940 and 1945. Peter Wickham, the exhausted assistant who grabbed the wrong drums, learns about his mistake 2 years after the fact. He's serving as a fuel systems mechanic with Bomber Command by then. His commanding officer calls him into the office and shows him a classified commendation. It says here you're to be thanked for your inadvertent contribution to British air superiority. Do you know what that means? Wickham reads the document, his hands beginning to shake. Oh Christ, the experimental batch. I thought I'd just gotten lucky that the engine didn't explode. You got more than lucky, son. You got brilliant, accidentally. The commendation goes into his service file, classified, never to be mentioned again. After the war, Wickham becomes a school teacher in Sussex. He never tells his students that he helped to win the Battle of Britain by being too tired to read a label correctly. There's a Spitfire in the museum's main hall. Mark I, serial number KE 9998, one of the original aircraft equipped with a special fuel system in May 1940. It's been restored to perfect condition, the Merlin engine gleaming, the camouflage paint immaculate. Visitors walk past it every day reading the placard. Supermarine Spitfire Mark I. This aircraft served with number 92 Squadron during the Battle of Britain, credited with 7 confirmed victories. What the placard doesn't mention is the small secondary fuel tank, still mounted beneath the cowling, or the red striped lever, positioned where the pilot's left hand would rest naturally, or the fact that this particular aircraft achieved 3 of its 7 victories in a single 8-minute engagement on August 15, 1940. The specifications are there for anyone who looks. Maximum speed, 362 miles per hour. Service ceiling, 31,000 feet. Range, 395 miles. But hidden in the engineering record, locked in archives that researchers rarely visit, is the addendum with 100-130th octane emergency fuel. Maximum speed 408 miles per hour. Service ceiling 34,000 feet. Duration of emergency power 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes, repeated thousands of times across hundreds of aircraft over 4 months of desperate combat, were the difference between Britain standing alone against Nazi Germany and Britain falling into darkness. All because one morning in March 1940, an engineer saw something impossible happening and decided not to shut it down. Sometimes the greatest victories don't come from perfect planning or brilliant strategy. Sometimes they come from mistakes we're wise enough to recognize as gifts. And sometimes the formula for winning a war is just slightly wrong fuel mixture and the courage to let it run for 30 more seconds. Author's note: while the core characters and specific engagement described here are dramatized for narrative purposes, the fundamental history is accurate. RAF fighter aircraft were equipped with 100-octane fuel beginning in 1940, providing significant performance advantages during the Battle of Britain. The development process was compressed and chaotic, driven by wartime urgency. The fuel technology genuinely contributed to British air superiority and was a closely guarded secret for years after the war. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, combined with high-octane aviation fuel, became one of the most significant technical advantages of the Allied air campaign.